Shabbat Shalom, everyone. So as I said earlier, it's a busy parsha with lots happening, but I want to focus on one aspect of this week's Torah portion, which is the appointment of Joshua, actually, as the next leader. For those online, there's a source sheet that Jordana is passing out. For those on that we're going to share, apparently. For those online, you can go to pasyn.org/sermon teaching to find the source sheet. And while Jordana is passing it out, I'm going to invite someone who has already got it to read the first piece, which is the first reading, Numbers 27, 12 to 14. Do I have someone who wants to read out loud? Yes, Vera, loudly.
And said to Moses, ascend these heights of Abarim and view the land that I have given to the Israelite people. When you have seen it, you too shall be gathered to your kin, just as your brother Aaron was. For in the wilderness of Zin, when the community was contentious and disobeyed my command to uphold my sanctity in their sight by means of the water. Those are the waters of Meribah Kadesh in the wilderness of Zin.
Okay, does someone want to summarize in normal English what these few verses actually are telling us? Yes, Boris.
What makes it secret is the power is what given back and now to the next generation. And what happened is God tells Moses and you don't have to cross. And what happened, now you have to take somebody else and have to bring the people to Israel.
Right, so what happens here is that God tells Moses that, you know what, you get to go look at the land that you've been schlepping these Israelites for 38 years. You get to go see the land, but you don't get to enter it. Because in an earlier parsha, Moses didn't listen to God, and he hit the rock and didn't talk to the rock, and this happened in the wilderness of Zin, at the waters of Meribah Kadesh. So this is, I think, I always find this very poignant. It's the pathos of God telling Moses, go see the land that you don't get to enter. I find it actually heartbreaking. And then immediately after this is the next section. Does someone want to read Numbers chapter 27, verses 15 to 20, loud and clear? Do I have a reader? No, let's find someone else here. Yeah, great, yeah.
Moses said to Adonai, saying, let Adonai, source of the breath of all flesh, appoint someone over the community who shall go out before them and come in before them, and who shall take them out and bring them in, so that Adonai's community will not be like sheep that have no shepherd. And Adonai answered Moses, single out Joshua, son of Nun, an inspired man, and lay your hand upon him. Have him stand before the rest of the priests and before the whole community, and commission him in their sight. Invest him with some of your authority, so that the whole Israelite community knows.
Beautiful, thank you. Okay, so there's a lot happening in these 5 verses. Does someone want to, questions, comments? What do you notice? What do you think? What questions arise for you? Yeah.
They become too dependent on Moses, the people, and this was almost like they're going to almost worship him in a sense, and so he's not going to get to see the land. And if we go into later on Parshas, there's other reasons why, of his replacement, God didn't want them to depend on him anymore.
Right. Let's just stick to actually what we see right here in these verses. Yeah, back there, yeah, Manny.
So I'm curious as to why Moses told Adonai what to do.
Right, so interesting, right? Moses, usually we have God saying, here's what's going to happen, right? Moses is saying to God, okay, you've told me I can't go into the land. Your turn. Figure out who's going to lead them. It's amazing. It's kind of stunning, actually, right? Anything else Jordana, back there, yeah.
I'm just curious to know what authority, or it says some of your authority, what part of his authority is he going to invest?
Yeah, great, perfect. What does this mean? Invest him with some of your authority. Great question. Some of these questions we're going to answer later. I'm just going to lift up the questions. Yeah, there were some other thoughts and reflections. Yeah.
I think Joshua, Moses is, the ark of prophets. And Joshua succeed to bring the Israelites from Egypt to, from the place that Moses gave it to him, like, to go this to the next generation.
Right. So it's interesting because so one of the questions is like, so why Joshua? Right? Like why Joshua? Why is Joshua appointed? And so it's so interesting because Moses says to God, again asking God, appoint someone over the community who shall go out before them and take them out and bring them in, so that they should not be like sheep without shepherd, right? So it's beautiful. What does that mean to take them out and bring them in? And Adonai says, single out Joshua. Here it's the translation is an inspired man. It's actually, in Hebrew, it's ish asher ruach. It's a man in whom there is spirit. I like the literal translation better, a man in whom there is spirit. The only thing that God says about Joshua is that he's an ish asher ruach, a man in whom is spirit, and lay your hand upon him. So I just want to say the laying of the hands is smicha. That's what the word we use now for rabbinic ordination is smicha. It comes from here. It's actually this transfer of power or of authority, and then have Eleazar. So there's a lot happening. Invest in with some of your authority. So, but one of the things that strikes me the most is actually what Rashi has to say, which is on the next source, on source 3. So Rashi says, so God tells Moses, you're not going to get to the promised land. Rashi, the 11th century commentator, French commentator, notices something that is dramatic, which is the very first thing that Moses says upon hearing he's not getting into the land, is that he asks God to find a new leader, right? And so Rashi says the statement serves to show the praise of the righteous. When they are about to depart from the world, they abandon all thought of their own affairs and occupy themselves with the affairs of the community. It's kind of stunning, right? Moses is told he's going to not get into the promised land, and instead of like, oy vey, how about me? He is completely selfish. His first concern as the leader is who's going to be the next leader. It's beautiful. I think the selflessness of it is actually beautiful and stunning and surprising. It's not all about him. It's actually, he's a leader who cares about the community. It's about the community. It's not all about him, which is a beautiful thing. The next source is from a midrash, rabbinic interpretation of the Torah, the midrash of Bamidbar Rabbah. It's from the 11th or 12th century. I'm going to read it and I'm going to sort of explain it again in English as opposed to rabbinic translation. So Moses spoke to the Lord, saying, "May the Lord of God, Spirit of all flesh, appoint a person over the congregation." So the rabbis are saying, okay, they notice that. So the rabbis, what they do is they look at a line from the Torah and then they imagine that the Torah is very terse. So they're trying to imagine what's going on in Moses' head, right? Because it doesn't tell us. What is Moses thinking? So the rabbis think that this is what Moses is thinking. He says to God, you know what? So appoint someone who pleads for the needs of the public. The Lord shall appoint. What does he request? So this appointment of Joshua comes right after the daughters of Tzlochad in the Torah portion. The daughters of Tzlochad, they're talking about an inheritance. They want the inheritance from their father. I talked about it last night. So right after the talking about an inheritance is this appointment of Joshua. So the rabbis say, well, it's logical for Moses to think that, you know what, my children should inherit the leadership, right? It should go, it's like if it's inheritance, I'm the leader, it should go to my kids. Why doesn't it go to my kids? Like if the daughters inherit, why don't my kids inherit? So, but God, the Holy Blessed One says, he says that your sons sat idly and didn't engage in Torah study. They don't deserve to be the leader. the leadership is a meritocracy. It doesn't just come to you. You have to earn it. And so the question is, why Joshua? Why Joshua? And they said that, so God tells them that Joshua, he served you. So Joshua served Moses. He was great to Moses. He would come early and stay late, right? Like, he worked really hard. He would arrange the benches and the mats. I love this. No job was too small for him. Sometimes as a rabbi, I'm like moving the chairs around, right? You know, they didn't teach us that in rabbinical school, but sometimes you just have to do what you have to do. And that's what Joshua did, right? So he worked hard, he studied hard, he did everything for Moses, and no job was too small. When we think about the characteristics that we want in our leaders, we want leaders that work hard. We want leaders that respect authority. We want leaders that have learned from their teachers, and that no job is too small for them. He served you with all of his might. So therefore, he's worthy of serving Israel, because that's what they want for a leader. So that's why God chose Moses. That's what the rabbis say. But then the question is, what does this mean? The only thing we know about Joshua from this Torah portion is that he had a ruach bo, like he had spirit inside him. So the rabbis are wondering, what does that mean? The only characteristic that's actually mentioned in the Torah is that. So there's a Hasidic rabbi that said, he told Moses to take a man in whom there is spirit, because only one who knows his or her own spirit can have knowledge of the spirit of others, right? It's about, there's this concept of like self-knowledge, but if you're secure in your own self, then you can see others. You can see what others need. And it's not all about you. Did I see a hand go up? Is there okay. Pardon me? In praise of that thought, right. No, right, it's beautiful. It's not, again, it's the leadership is not, it's a selfless leadership. It's about seeing others and understanding others, and having the security in yourself to be able to accept others. And then Rabbeinu Bachia says, in a man in whom there is spirit, it's a reference to the Holy Spirit, that God's Spirit was in Joshua. But I like to think that the Ruach Bo is actually that Joshua had spirituality, right? It was not just, he didn't just live in his head, but he lived in his heart, he lived in his soul. He was a spiritual leader. And that's what the community needed going into the Promised Land. They needed a leader who was in touch with their own spirituality. So I love this, the ruach, the spirit of the soul. And then someone just asked about what kind of authority is transferred. So in the next one, it says, so the rabbis also notice they're very close readers. They say that, God tells them to lay his hand on him and give him some of his authority. So why are there two things? Sometimes it's like, why? Why is that? Like, why do you need both? So that the Midrash says, lay your hand on him. That is like lighting one candle to another. So it's like transferring the flame, right? It's a beautiful image, like your hand, like transfer the flame from one candle to another. Give him some of your authority is like emptying one vessel into another. So it's like, give him the authority. You, as an authority leader, you have to actually transfer power to him. So the Rabbi Jonathan Sacks of blessed memory, the former chief rabbi of England, looks at this midrash, and he has a beautiful talk. He talks beautifully about what these two different things are. He talks about influence and power, and transferring influence and transferring power. He says influence is like lighting one candle with another. Sharing your influence with someone else does not mean you have less. You have more. When we use the flame of a candle to light another candle, the first is not diminished. There is now simply more light, right? We all have that ability, right? All of us. We have the ability to light others, to influence. We have so much power to influence others for good, and it doesn't diminish us to do that. It's this beautiful thing. It doesn't diminish us to influence others. It actually increases light in the world. Transferring power, he says, is like emptying one vessel into another, because the more power you give away, the less you have. Moses' power ended with his death. His influence, though, remains to this day. Judaism has an ambivalent attitude towards power. It's necessary, but Judaism long ago recognized that power tends to corrupt. Influence, the relation of prophet to people, teacher to discipline, is a non-zero-sum game. Influence, he says, is simply more enduring than power, right? So we all have, like, we think about power and power dynamics a lot, but I also, I think Rabbi Jonathan Sacks encourages us to think not about power, but about the influence we have, right? And how, like, influence is more enduring than power. And I just want to end with something that is noticed. So after all of this, God, tells Moses what to do, and then Moses does as Adonai commands him. He takes Joshua, he has him stand before Eleazar the priest and the whole community, and then he lays his hands, emphasis on z, upon him, and commissioned him as God spoke. But the rabbis noticed that God told Moses to lay one hand. He just said hand, not plural. But Moses lays his hands. So it shows that the Rashi says that he's not only not ambivalent and not sad about transferring power, but he's generous in the transfer of power. He does even more than God asks, right? And so when we think about transferring power, when we think about how we go from an orderly transition from one leader to another, I think Moses is really an inspiration on so many levels. He doesn't bemoan his own fate. He thinks selflessly of the community. Joshua is there chosen because of his spirit, his spirituality. Moses recognizes the influence he has, and he unambiguously just transfers with so much generosity and anoints Joshua with both hands.
Community by scanning the QR code or by going to supportpas.org or by making a donation. Shalom and see you in Shul.